on a dramatically different day, Carol, than what we saw yesterday in U.S. equities.
Yeah, I think this is kind of the norm for us, right? We see just bouncing around. I feel like, we're going to count down to that CPI report. Does that change things again in terms of what people think about interest rates and what the Fed does? We just kind of bounce from tone to tone and sentiment to sentiment.
Everything's kind of higher except for energy. Saw oil plunge and hit the energy sector here in the U.S. after news from Beijing ended without new stimulus measures. So that has energy companies on edge and investors on edge. But other than that, everything else is higher.
There are a lot of catalysts in the market right now, big, broad macro factors. And also, it's obviously with the start of earnings season, there are going to be a lot of company specific factors. But the consistent message we keep getting is that no one's going to do anything until after the election, until it's clear which administration will be sitting in the White House. Because until then, everything's kind of up in the air in terms of policy.
Yeah, absolutely. Though you do kind of wonder whether they're going to have the luxury of waiting here. Of course, we have a couple of key economic data points coming up, another Fed meeting, and of course, earnings season, which kicks off this week. So it'll be interesting to see what we hear out of some of these companies and whether that changes the market thesis in any way, shape, or form. We get the closing bells here in New York here on this Tuesday afternoon, and a much different day than what we saw yesterday. Green across the screen here with the S&P 500, not far from its record highs. Record high right around 57.62 and change. It looks like it's going to close today right around 57.51 as we wait for these numbers to settle. That's about 1% higher than where it was yesterday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up about 0.3%. The Nasdaq Composite up about 1.5%. And the Russell 2000 holding on to modest gains here on the day. It's going to close higher by about 2 points or 0.1%.
Just eking it out. All right, let's go back to the large caps, S&P 500. Most names, or a majority, I should say, 313 names to the upside in the S&P 500, guys. 187 losing ground, and Scarlet, 3 unchanged.
All right, let's take a look at how the sectors shake out here on this Tuesday. You have 9 sectors in the green. Tech is leading the way, and that's really semiconductors like an Intel and NVIDIA, communication services, and consumer discretionary also gaining at least 1%. The weak spots in the market are energy, and that's that there we go, that thin red bar there, down 2.6% with 21 out of 22 big cap energy names in the red. Materials losing ground by about 0.4%.
Was that a zoom in on the red bar?
It was.
That was super cool. All
right, let's professionals over here, Carol Massar.
So I hear. All right, let's get to some of the individual gainers, guys. Scarlett mentioned about the semiconductor area. NVIDIA up about 4%, so just off its highs of the day. It is one of the top gainers in the Nasdaq 100, facing concerns about electricity demand of AI computing. They touted the energy efficiency of their latest chips. That was a conference today in Washington. We actually talked to our Ian King about the significance of it. The point is, though, if you're going to be using even more of these chips ultimately to compute, the energy demand is just going to grow as well. Anyway, I should point out shares now up about 12% in the past 5 trading days, longest streak in about 1.5 months. So it has been certainly moving higher. Robinhood, guys, up about 10% in today's trade, or just shy of 10%, surging after the company announced plans to host its first investor day on December 4th in New York. The company said it will share more about its vision for the next 10 or more years. We saw a lot of call options activity, too, on this one. You might remember back in a couple of days ago.
Oh, yeah.
Politico, like how you do that. Politico reported that Robinhood's chief legal officer, Dan Gallagher, is emerging as a top contender to head the SEC should Donald Trump find himself back in the White House. One more, DocuSign, a favorite during the pandemic, up about 6.5%, up the most to the highest in more than 2 years. S&P Dow Jones saying that the company will join the S&P Midcap 400 index before trading opens on October 11th. So you saw investors moving into that one.
All right, Carol, with the gainers, I got the decliners. I do want to start with shares of Roblox. They fell by a little over 2%, but earlier in the session, they were down as much as 9.4%. Short seller Hindenburg Research came out, said they're betting against the company. They said Roblox has inflated key metrics and alleged that it doesn't have sufficient safety screens to prevent pedophiles from using the platform. Should note that a Roblox spokesperson said, quote, "We totally reject the claims made in the report. The authors are admittedly short sellers. They have an agenda irrespective of the substance of Roblox's business model and results." I would just give a shout out to Olivia Carville and her story for Business Week that she wrote just a few months ago on this topic. Everybody should go and check that out. Also, to the energy sector, Scarlett talked a little bit about that and what it did in the S&P 500. Oil plunging today. We saw that hit the energy sector here in the U.S. Marathon Petroleum falling 7.7%. It was the worst performing energy name in the S&P 500 today. Fell as the top economic planner in China ended a highly anticipated briefing on Tuesday without a new stimulus measure. China is the world's top crude importer. And speaking of China, I got Carol's Nasdaq Golden Dragon China Index today.
Wait.
Yeah, I got it.
Stole your thunder.
Wait.
I'm sorry, you got to do it on a day.
Yeah.
It fell the most since October of 2022, 6.9% lower. U.S. stocks listed, or Chinese stocks listed here in the U.S. tumbled today because of that lack of new stimulus measure from Beijing. Worst day in a couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely astonishing here to see the unwind that we saw in some of those indices and ETFs. Meanwhile, in the yield space, I guess a relative calm compared to what we had seen in the previous days. That rout in the Treasury market easing here on this Tuesday afternoon. You saw a modest drop in yields on the shorter end of the curve, down about 3 basis points on the 2-year. And we're basically just going to call your 10 and 20-year unchanged. Your 30-year yield did tick up higher slightly as well. But once again, the moves too minuscule to really call it anything other than status quo.
All right, that's all the market wrap up. Getting ready for earnings and curious to see what CEOs and the C-suite have to say about kind of their workforce, because right now we've got already Home Depot saying that all of its corporate employees are required to work a full day, so a full 8 hours at its stores every quarter. They're trying to support their retail staff who have found it more and more challenging.
I think this is brilliant.
Yeah, me too.
For a few reasons. I mean, one, the whole idea of understanding what other employees go through, what your coworkers go through. If you're sitting in an office running a company that has so many workers on the front lines and trying to develop policies to interact with customers, ways to make things more efficient, ways to make employees work better, what better way to do that than actually going? I'm surprised this doesn't happen at every company.
Maybe this should be a new thing, like a new trend among leadership at for CEOs to have all the top senior executives spend some time on the front lines.
Yeah, and I mean, I was actually surprised that they weren't doing this already. I mean, you would think a company, particularly like Home Depot, that's so sort of customer forward there, would have already had something implemented. But I don't see anything but good coming out of this.
Right? Yeah, especially amid store theft and just the stress of it and. Anyway, so
store theft? Are you saying you're putting these people in harm's way now?
Well, yeah, no. People, when there are people coming in and they might take something, a lot of the store employees are like, I can't stand in the way because who knows what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, you think the corporate employees are going to stand in the way?
Well, no. At least they'll understand what their employees are dealing with, right?
I got you.
Yeah. Okay. They can now see for themselves.
I was in a CVS and I saw the same thing. People walked in, the cashier looked at them, was like, oh, here it goes.
Here it goes, yeah. Let's see what happens.
They walked out with Funyuns and Skittles.
There you go. The other story that we're watching, which I thought was really interesting, was Quantis Airways apologizing after it inadvertently put on a movie for everyone across every screen in the cabin, which was it was called Daddy-O with Dakota Johnson and Sean Penn, and it was an R-rated movie, and there were some adult topics in the movie, but it was playing for everyone because there's a problem with the screen and people couldn't make their own individual movie selection. So Qantas had to apologize, but rival carrier Air New Zealand tweeted out that plot twist, we let you choose your own movies as a way to troll Qantas.
So Daddy-O on every screenio, huh?
There you go.
And that was Baddy-O.
Yeah, apparently users on Reddit said it was impossible for individual passengers to turn off the movie.
What do you guys do? Like, every once in a while you watch a movie and there's obviously a scene that, it's not that it's R-rated, but
uncomfortable?
I get uncomfortable when I look at the person next to me and I'm like, oh, should I shut this off? It's a weird
Well, they have
thing.
warnings now on some of the movies that you choose.
Yeah.
But when it happens, it happens, right?
They blur out some stuff,
just
right?
keep in mind that there are other people around when you're watching this. I've seen that.
Huh. Yeah. Okay, interesting.
You got nothing for us, Romaine?
Huh?
Get nothing?
No,
he's not gonna contribute to this.
I just read Carol Massar.
Old
I read my books, little Shakespeare, Adam Smith.
Nice.
Light reading.
Don't believe it, everybody.
The Wealth of Nations with Romaine.
That's right.